Anyway, welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. And I will slow down because, I do talk too fast. It's my Alabama thing. So just so the audience can understand my pearly words of wisdom. Well, I don't know how pearly or how wisdom they are or wise they are. But anyway, let's get started. Bruno Kaufmann is with us today. Hey, Bruno, how are you?
Hello, Dane. Good to have me again on this show. I'm happy. I'm here in my hometown, Arboga in Sweden.
Arboga. It's amazing how you say that. It's really nice. But it's a beautiful place. For those of you who have not been there, you should visit. It really is a beautiful place. So, Bruno, we're here today to talk about several things. But first, let's talk about Greenland because, as we know, Trump talked about we want to take Greenland, we're going to take Greenland by force or whatever, and it's kind of fallen off the radar screen. So, but things are happening there. So, talk to us about what's happening in Greenland.
Yes, in Greenland, in fact, today, the first time the leaderships of military of the US and Denmark are gathering to discuss how to protect Greenland. And I mean, this is in fact something which has happened for more than 20 years in this committee annual meetings, but it's the first time since last year's big, let's say, announcements of President Trump to take over Greenland that this meeting takes place. And it's especially also an opportunity for the Greenlandic government to show that they are the masters of their own home. And it will be very interesting about which results will come up out of this meeting today in Nuuk.
So in Greenland, I mean, I know you've been there. I mean, is it? I mean, are Greenlanders? I guess that's what you call them. Are they? What's the feeling in Greenland these days about Trump's, desire to have them?
Yeah, there's always been an ambivalence regarding this kind of interest from the US president, even during his first term. And the Greenlanders on one side are very flattered that Washington has such an interest in their country. They are especially interested in economic cooperation. But of course, also Greenlanders know that security-wise, the US has since the Second World War had an important role and is in a way a guarantee of the independence and safety of this part of the world. But obviously, the ways this has been formulated last year wasn't really in the idea or the interest of the Greenlanders. So they were very angry about this aggressive language. And now, when the meeting started yesterday, the new ambassador Howry of the US in Denmark, which is also responsible for Greenland, he underlined the second part of Trump's announcement last year is that the US is respecting the free will of the Greenlanders to decide about their future. And that's what the Greenlanders are taking into account and what they really want.
Well, so let's just segue this into, we're talking about, okay, America is going to help protect Greenland. Okay, Greenland is part of Denmark, and so as we all know, Trump's administration just came out with, I would call the Trump Doctrine on the relationship between the U.S. and Europe, and basically saying that Europe is going to self-destruct. I'm just paraphrasing here. That Europe is going to self-destruct because of all the internal divisions and how Europe is pushing back on freedom of speech, basically, and the opportunity to express democracy and freedom on the continent. And also what was quite interesting is it talked about how how America basically no longer saw Russia as a threat. I mean, it was a very, it was a very intense document in the reality of changing the whole relationship between the U.S. And Europe, and now Denmark being part. I want to ask you specifically about that, but in relation to protecting Denmark militarily, which is part of Europe. Well, it's not part of Europe, but I guess technically, is it part of Europe or North America? Where is it part of Europe, right? Was
Greenland.
my
Oh, I mean, geographically, Greenland is obviously part of North America, but politically, it has been very much part of Europe. Yeah.
Yeah. So well, let me just say, so what do you make of Trump's new doctrine regarding Europe?
I mean, it's new and new. It's what basically J.D. Vance talked about at the Munich Security Conference already when he came there first in February this year. It's all about this projection, you can say, of American policies towards Europe, which means, I mean, in a way that yeah, the idea of internal division is put onto the European shoulders. The idea of limitation of freedom of speech, what happens in the United States, is put on European shoulders. So it's in a way the same policies as Mr. Putin for many years have done towards Europe, blaming Europe for things which he or his regime basically do to his own people. And Europe is in a way quite getting used to this kind of blame game, and everybody tries to find a constructive solution. I mean, the responsible for foreign policies in the European Union, Kaja Kallas, the former Prime Minister of Estonia, she also said, I mean, there's always an idea of how can we find a way how to cooperate still together. She said at the Doha security meeting that, I mean, there is still the US, which is our partner, and there are weaknesses in Europe. We have to become stronger. So it's kind of this mixed feelings. But on the other side, it's clear taking this security policy, which is declared now really serious, means that there is a profound change in attitude from Washington towards Europe, and Europe needs to be much more on its own, needs to understand its own security threats, and needs especially also to work together much more in this way. But at the same time, it's continuing also from Washington and from Moscow that they try to support less democratic regimes in Europe, like the Hungarian one. They think the AfD, the extreme right party in Germany, is like a positive force for Germany, and this kind of things needs to be handled in a very sensitive and very smart way by the Europeans.
Well, it's interesting because basically what it says is that, I mean, I think it's also just a shot across the bow, as we say, where America is going to actively participate, well, in European elections, as you were just talking about. And I think that, so you already have Russia playing in the elections, and you have the U.S. playing in elections. And you're a very political guy. You understand the dynamics more than anybody I know. But so it seems to me that Russia and the United States, when it comes to certain European elections, are going to be on the same side, trying to ensure, like, let's look at Hungary with the new election coming up there with Orban. I think that he's going to be in a tough re-election fight, and they want him to win. As a European, does it concern you that now you have two basically major powers going to be playing in these elections?
I would say yes and no. I mean, yes, obviously that this is something which we never would have expected in that way from the United States for a very long time, because there was this agreement that free and fair elections are important. And just think about many of the US organizations involved in democracy support and observations. This is really changing now. But on the other side, you can also say that this kind of obvious interference, this obvious taking side, doesn't help this, let's say, supported parties very much. I would say Mr. Orban should be concerned about an open support by that, because Europeans and European voters are, like other voters in other countries, not very enthusiastic about having a foreign superpower being involved. I would say it's almost like I have experienced many times in Taiwan, when China is too obvious in its interference. This doesn't really help the local forces, which may be more sympathetic to them. So in a way, it's an invitation to not elect these powers, and we have just seen that last weekend in the mayoral election in Bucharest, where again, I mean, a right-wing pro-Russian candidate made a very bad result after being obviously supported both by Moscow and Washington, and the Liberal Democratic Party candidate made the race, and this happened also earlier in the year in the presidential election. It's not a very smart way, and it will be on the other side very interesting to see if the U.S. next year, when there will be the midterm elections in November, if they, for the first time now, for many, many years, will not allow a delegation from the OSCE, the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, where the US is part of, Russia is part of, Europe is part of. If they will not allow such a delegation to observe the elections, that will also show that there is really no idea of supporting cooperating democracy anymore.
Well, listen, and definitely keep me up to date when you hear more about what's going to happen to the OSCE. But yeah, I mean, we have a president, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but listen, I love America. I mean, I love my country. There's no doubt about it. And we go through periods of ups and downs, and so when I speak about our current president, it's not that I don't love my country, because I do love my country, but the reality is that we have a situation now where President Trump, is a very transactional president. I don't know of a single time in his presidency this term where he has spoken of the importance of protecting democracy. I don't know those words ever crossed his lips, and that's very concerning when you have a country as powerful as America, and the leader of that country is not talking about the importance of protecting democracy. It's a huge issue. And one other thing I want to say is that in working with all these countries around the world that I do, you have two levels of the U.S. government, and people need to understand this. You get the working level, the State Department, Department of War, the people who are the bureaucrats, the people who work every single day, who are trying to do the right thing and working with like Estonia and Europe and UK and Ukraine and trying to do their job. And then you have the president and the executive office of the president, which the problem we have now in America is that the rhetoric from the president does not meet what the working level is doing, and that's the conflict. So a lot of these countries, and like I was reading a story the other day, I think it was the head of the intelligence community from Germany saying, "Oh well, we're still working with the American government," and well, yes, at the working level you might, but the reality is Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He can change anything at any point in time. And you can't, and that's why it's such a difficult situation. But let me ask this: among Europeans, and I spend a lot of time in Europe, as you know, do you feel that the views of America itself is diminishing? That the respect, or I don't know how you want to categorize it, but are most Europeans or many Europeans starting to think poorly of the United States?
I mean, there has always been this kind of divided views on America. I mean, I'm now 60 years old, and I mean, during my life there has always been not just a one-sided view. I mean, obviously since 1990, when the Cold War ended and Europe in a way unified, there was this understanding that America is part of and supporter of the democratic world. But before, I still remember very well that there were a lot of fundamental criticism which was based in imperialistic wars around the world and very undemocratic behaviors in many ways. So this idea that America is just a force for the good and for democracy, that's maybe a view the Americans themselves had a little bit too much of themselves, and there has always been this kind of division about which kind of strategies and ways are done. And even under other presidencies, there has always been like different aspects of the American foreign policy which have been deeply criticized in Europe. So I'm not sure that Europe is now basically, I mean, being in love with the United States for a long time and now giving up on that. I think there is a much more realistic way that things are, as you also have said, I mean, it's going up and down, and there are still many aspects in America and the United States which European loves, but other things, of course, not. And especially many people maybe are not so interested to travel anymore to the United States at this moment, because they never can be sure if they will be allowed into the country, if they have done a post on social media at some point in the past. So it's like the world has become a much more harder place. You have to think about where you go, what you have said before, and you have to be maybe when you traveling, taking your special travel phone or computer, so you're not in a way stopped on the border because there is some content maybe the country you're going to doesn't like.
Yeah. Well, by the way, congratulations on joining the 60-year plus club. So happy birthday to you belatedly. Sorry I
Thank
missed
you.
sorry I missed the shindig.
No
Um,
problem. I just
well,
follow you. I just follow you on the path.
there's one fact of life. I will always be older than you. There's one thing that will never change. Well, it's interesting when you talk about the travel because I know in FIFA coming up, I mean, there's a lot of concern about people tourist. It's going to be interesting, which is another show that we should do at some point in time. Is that with all these travel restrictions and travel bans and people coming to the United States, I mean, how is that going to impact FIFA? And are people going to be scared to come, to visit because you have ICE, immigration officials around, and so that's going to be a mess in many ways. But real quick, so we got a couple of minutes here. What do you think? I mean, I'll tell you my personal opinion. I do think in many ways that one positive is that of President Trump is it has forced, in my opinion, Europeans to be more reflective of their future. Okay, it has caused that now. But do you think if you had to say what is the one positive thing the Trump administration has brought to Europe, what would you say that is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, making us more conscious about our own responsibilities, our own ways of cooperating, and also become more conscious about the value of cooperation within Europe, not just seeing it as a continuation of some transatlantic post World War II agreements. It's especially also important, I think, for the newer parts of the European Union. We are now discussing extension by three countries, Albania, Montenegro, and North Macedonia by 2020. 30, so Europe will have 30 member states, and I think this kind of strategic cooperation in Europe is getting more and more important because there are so many unfriendly, undemocratic forces around, from Turkey to Russia, and now also including the United States.
Mm. And do you think? I mean, I can't remember. I can't remember who it was yesterday. I don't think it was J.D. Vance. It was another member of the Trump administration that says that it's that the European Union is now on its path for dissolution. Do you think you just talked about the expansion of it, but do you think there's any risk at all of the European Union dissolving?
I mean, not in that way. I think for Europeans, I mean, I'm living here in Sweden. Sweden joined the European Union in 1995, and I mean, initially was many people in Sweden were very skeptical about it, but now a big majority also sees the benefits of this kind of cooperation, and this is even true. I mean, I was last week in Poland. Europe is such an important force, even if there are political divisions. So I would say that the European Union is still one of the greatest, most interesting political projects in the world because it also has a really profound foundation in the idea of democracy and citizenship. And in that way, I would say that all these attacks, all these question marks, they also only can prove that Europe is on the right way.
Well, I agree with you 100%, and I would argue that I wish many Americans would understand that the Europeans and democracy is healthy on the continent, and I think that we Americans have a lot to learn from Europe positively. That's the one thing that concerns me among many things is that Trump's rhetoric, I think, makes the world less secure because it empowers the bad people, especially like Russia. And so I think that he has to understand. I hope one day, well, he's not going to change, but I would hope that he would understand at some point that his rhetoric does have a negative impact on the physical security of the world, and that is a great concern. Listen, Bruno, it's always a great pleasure having you on the show. You're one of the smartest people I know, and you always have a great insight into what's going on. So I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. And as I said, Dane, I'm just following you.